and welcome to the Lane Library's Storytime Live. I'm your children's librarian, Miss Cathy at the Hamilton Lane Library. And today we are going to start with our hello song. Are your fingers ready? Let's begin. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. It's time to say hello. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. It's time to say hello. Hello, friends. And how are you today? I'm so glad you could be with us. Today, I am sharing stories, especially for Black History Month. February is a time of the year when we remember special African Americans who contributed to the history of their people, but also of our country. And our first story today is from one of my favorite Black creators, Miss Jacqueline Woodson. We are going to read her book, Showway. And thank you to G.P. Putnam and Sons, an imprint of Penguin Random House, for permission to read this. When Suni's great-grandma was 7, she was sold from the Virginia land to a plantation in South Carolina without her ma or pa, but with some muslin her ma gave her. And 2 needles she got from the big house, and thread dyed bright red with berries from the chokecherry tree. In South Carolina, Big Mama raised Suni's great-grandma, raised most of the slave children on that large patch of land. At night, Big Mama told the children stories she'd tell in a whisper about children growing up and getting themselves free, and the children leaned in and listened real hard. And in the daytime, when there was some few minutes for a slave to rest a bit, Big Mama taught Suni's great-grandma to sew colored thread into stars and moons and roads that slave children grew up and followed late in the night, a piece of quilt and the true moon leading them. Years passed. Big Mama moved on to the next world. And Suni's great-grandma grew up, jumped broom with a young man named Enslow. Had herself a baby girl named Mathis May. Loved that baby up so. Yes, she loved that baby up. And one day, Mathis May would be Suni's grandma, but not for a long, long time yet. In the meantime, she learned to sew. Beautiful girl child learned to sew. When Mathis May was 7, she got sold away. Took a star from her mama's blanket, took a little piece of the road, pressed it to her face when she wanted to remember back home, held it to her heart to feel back home, got herself a piece of muslin and some thread somewhere and kept up her sewing. Sewed so fine. She was making clothes for everyone in the big house and slaves too. And at night, she sewed stars and moons and roads, tiny patch pieces of stars and moons and roads. Slaves whispered that what no one was allowed to say. Go to the log cabin, stay on the drunkard's path, walk in a zigzagged line to the crossroads. Look for wild geese flying to find the North Star. That Mathis may know how to make a show way. Came to her when they needed to talk, came to her for the stories of brave people, came to her for the patch pieces just before they disappeared into the night. Look at that quilt behind her. But Mathis May stayed on, grew tall and straight boned, jumped broom with another slave. Jumping the broom meant that she was getting married. That slave was killed running off to the north side of the war months before he got to meet his baby, a girl child who was born free that same year, 1863. History went and lost her name. Years later, Suni came. Suni's mama held her up in the moonlight night, showed her the stars, the moon, whispered into her ear, there's a road, girl, there's a road. Love that Suni up so. Yes, she loved that Suni up. Suni and her mama stayed on the land they'd always known, picking cotton, for a little pay and a piece of that ground to farm. Called that land home. Stayed on with other people, none of them slaves anymore. Hard work making a life, from pink day to blue-black night, but it was a free life just the same. And when the day was finally over, wasn't hard to find a thing or two to smile about. At night, they cut and sewed, strange lines and odd designs. People said about Suni, that child could find some beauty in so many things. And there they are, working on a quilt, and there's Suni stitching. When Suni was 7, she was tall and straight boned like her mama. Took in wash with her mama, sewed stars on patch pieces, sewed stars and moons and roads, sewed fields and rivers and trees. Patched the pieces together for her mama to sell come market day. Called those quilts Trail to the North. Called the quilts Showway. Didn't much need that secret trail to the north anymore, but started living well off the money those quilts brought in. Sewed those quilts to live, sewed those quilts to remember. And though some could read, most could not. Stars and moon and roads. Picture reading was what they'd always known. Some morning, Suni looked out over the fields of cotton and dreamed of a place to call her own. married a man named Walter Scott, who owned a bit of land in Anderson, South Carolina, had herself a baby girl, named that baby girl Georgiana. Love that baby up so. Yes, they love that baby up. Here we go, taken in the wash, sewing quilts, selling quilts at market day, getting married, and having a baby to love up. Georgiana, who grew tall and straight-boned and free, picking out words from her mama's Bible by 3, reading by oil light at the age of 5. People say about Georgiana, she always had a book in her hand, grew up to teach in a small school in Anderson, had 2 girls at once, named them Carolyn and Ann. Love those babies up so. Yes, they love those babies up. Reading by her oil lamp, teaching school. And there's Carol and Ann. When Carolyn and Ann grew up tall and straight-boned, turned 7, walking in a line to change the laws that kept Black people and white people living separate. They were a little bit scared sometimes, but pinned inside their dresses were showway patches Grandma Suni had given them. And something about those patches made Scared hang his mean old head and walk away. Anne grew up writing poems, and sometimes she made the poems into songs. Carolyn stitched those songs into art that people bought to hang up on their walls. Anne had me, and Mama loved this baby up so. Yes, she loved this baby up. When I was 7, I didn't have to work in the field or walk in any freedom lines, but I still read like Georgiana and wrote like Anne. And when the words were slow in coming, I sewed stars and moons and roads into quilts and curtains and clothes because Mama said, all the stuff that happened before you were born is your own kind of showway. There's a road, girl, my mama said. There's a road. If you look real careful in the stars, you can see a lady. And then there's the girl on her bed sewing. And I grew up tall and straight-boned, writing every day. And the words became books that told the stories of many people's showways. Had a baby and named that child Toshi Georgiana. Love that Toshi up so. Yes, I love that Toshi up. So some mornings I start all over, holding tight to little Toshi. I whisper a story that came before her. Now, Suni was your great-great-great-grandma. And when Suni's great-grandma was 7, so we have Suni's great-grandma, Mathis May, Suni's mama, Suni, Georgiana, Carolyn and Ann, and Jacqueline, the author of this book, and Toshi Georgiana. The end. So this book was a little bit about Jacqueline Woodson's family. And the reason why I have a quilt hanging back behind us is that in some families, that is in some African-American families, there are stories that are passed down about quilts being used to help Black slaves to freedom. Now, we can't prove that this is true. There are no records. There's no written evidence or proof, but these stories keep being passed down through certain families and communities still the same. And since slaves were not allowed to read or write, they did learn to communicate using other ways, such as song. So who knows? Maybe quilts were used to help communicate a path to freedom. One of the quilt blocks that was supposedly part of this quilt symbol code is the log cabin block, which is what I have behind here today. And the center block in the quilt would supposedly let someone know whether or not it was a safe place to stop and get help. So what do you think? Do you think it's that the quilt code could maybe be real? I don't think we're ever going to know, but I do like the fact that this is part of some people's oral histories and their family stories that get told. Are we ready to get up and move now? Let's do a little song. Let's all do a little clapping. Let's all do a little clapping. Let's all do a little clapping and share good times here. Let's all do a little stretching. Oh, stretch our muscles. Let's all do a little stretching. Let's all do a little stretching. And share good times here. Now, if you have room, you need to stand up for this one. Let's all do a little jumping. Let's all do a little jumping. Let's all do a little jumping and share good times here. Oh, I hope that helped you get some wiggles out for our next story. Our next story is a biography, and it is about one of my most favorite Black musicians. Title of this book is Trombone Shorty. And it was written by Trombone Shorty Andrews, and illustrated by Brian Collier. And it's read with permission today from Abrams Children's Books. We have our own way of living down here in New Orleans and our own way of talking too. And that's what we like to say when we tell a friend hello. So, where you at? Lots of kids have nicknames, but I want to tell you the story of how I got mine. Just like you listen to your favorite song, let's start at the beginning, because this is a story about music. But before you can understand how much music means to me, you have to know how important it is to my hometown, my greatest inspiration. I grew up in a neighborhood in New Orleans called Treme. Any time of day or night, you could hear music floating in the air. And there was music in my house too. My big brother James played the trumpet so loud, you could hear him halfway across town. He was the leader of his own band, and my friends and I would pretend to be in the band too. Follow me, James would say. Look, there's Troy trying to play the horn like his brother. There's one time every year that's more exciting than any other: Mardi Gras. Parades fill the streets and beaded necklaces are thrown through the air to the crowd. I love the brass bands with their own trumpets, trombones, saxophones, and the biggest brass instrument of them all, the tuba, which rested over the musician's head like an elephant's trunk. Where you at? Where you at? The musicians would call. All day long, I could see brass bands parade by my house while my neighbors danced along. I love those parades during Mardi Gras because they made everyone forget about their troubles for a little while. People didn't have a lot of money in Treme, but we always had a lot of music. I listened to all these sounds and mixed them together. Just like how we make our food. We take one big pot and throw in some sausage, crab, shrimp, chicken, vegetables, rice, whatever's in the kitchen, and stir it all together and let it cook. When it's done, it's the most delicious taste you've ever tried. We call it gumbo. And that's what I wanted my music to sound like. Different styles combined to create my own musical gumbo. I think that's Troy's mama in the kitchen making that gumbo. But first I needed an instrument. The greatest thing about music is you don't even need a real instrument to play. So some of my friends and I decided to make our own. We might have sounded different from the real brass bands, but we felt like the greatest musicians of Treme. We were making music, and that's all that mattered. Then one day I found a broken trombone that looked too beaten up to make music anymore. It didn't sound perfect, but I finally had a real instrument in my hand. I was ready to play. The next time the parade went by my house, I grabbed that trombone and headed out into the street. My brother noticed me playing along and smiled proudly. "Trombone Shorty," he called out, because the instrument was twice my size. "Where ya?" From that day on, everyone called me Trombone Shorty. I took that trombone everywhere I went and never stopped playing. I was so small that sometimes I fell right over to the ground because it was so heavy. But I always got back up and I learned to hold it up high. I listened to my brother play songs over and over and taught myself those songs too. I practiced day and night, and sometimes I fell asleep with the trombone in my hands. One day, my mom surprised me with tickets to the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, the best and biggest music festival in town. We went to see Bo Diddley, whom my mom said was one of the most important musicians of all time. As I watched him on stage, I raised my trombone to my lips and started to play along. He stopped his band in the middle of the song and asked the crowd, "Who's that playing out there?" Everyone started pointing, but Bo Diddley couldn't see me because I was the smallest one in the place. So my mom held me up in the air and said, "That's my son, Trombone Shorty." "Well, Trombone Shorty, come on up here," Bo Diddley said. The crowd passed me overhead until I was standing on stage next to Bo Diddley himself. I walked right up to the microphone and held my trombone high up in the air, ready to blow. "What do you want to play?" Bo Diddley asked. "Follow me," I said. After I played with Bo Diddley, I knew I was ready to have my own band. I got my friends together and we called ourselves the 5 o'clock band because that was the time we went out to play each day after finishing our homework. We played all around New Orleans. I practiced and practiced, and soon my brother James asked me to join his band. When people wondered who the kid in his band was, he'd proudly say, "That's my little brother, Trombone Shorty. Where you at?" And now I have my own band called Trombone Shorty and Orleans Avenue, named after a street in Treme. I've played all around the world, but I always come back home to New Orleans. And when I'm home, I make sure to keep my eyes on the younger musicians in town and help them out, just like my brother did for me. Look, he's playing in the hot air balloon above St. Louis Cathedral. And there's Paris. And then back in New Orleans. Today, I play at the same New Orleans Jazz Festival where I once played with Bo Diddley. And when the performance ends, I lead a parade of musicians around, just like I used to do in the streets of Treme with my friends. Excuse me. Where you at? Where you at? I still keep my trombone in my hands, and I will never let it go. The end. And here's some pictures. Trombone Shorty at a second line as a little boy. Trombone Shorty with Bo Diddley. And here's a picture of Trombone Shorty. I hope you have a great day and come see us here at the Hamilton Lane Library on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 for our regular family story times. Have a great day.